Iron Rain shattered the European continent. Millions of tons of steel obliterated ancient, magnificent capitals. Occupying armies drained national treasuries to fuel their panzers. Citizens faced extreme, state-mandated starvation across the occupied territories. Yet beneath the rubble, a desperate population survived using entirely absurd financial instruments.
And the tins.
Nylons and chocolate defeated the Reichsmark. Traditional paper currency lost all value in the streets. Desperate families traded heirloom jewelry for simple luxury goods. A single pair of silk stockings could buy survival. When total war destroys the agricultural and monetary foundation, civilian desperation inevitably births a shadow economy. Let us unearth the bizarre ledgers of occupied Europe. The occupier weaponized agricultural output, and invading armies systematically requisitioned the vast majority of local harvests. Trainloads of civilian grain were continuously redirected toward the front. Civilian caloric intake was mathematically slashed to state-mandated starvation levels. Official ration cards quickly became completely worthless pieces of paper. Mothers stood in freezing lines for hours, only to find the bakeries entirely empty. This deliberate state-sponsored deprivation effectively transformed food distribution into a ruthless instrument of totalitarian demographic control. Fiat currency collapsed almost immediately. The occupying authorities intentionally flooded the markets with worthless marks. This calculated financial sabotage rapidly triggered a devastating localized inflation. Paper money completely lost its fundamental ability to purchase survival. The wealthy citizens watched their bank accounts evaporate into absolute nothingness. People quickly realized that holding traditional cash was entirely useless when grocery shelves remained perpetually bare. When a sovereign state deliberately destroys faith in its fiat currency, society instinctively reverts to primal barter. A shadow economy rapidly materialized. Desperate citizens bypassed the heavily policed and entirely empty official markets.
Here, quickly. Got it.
The underground network operated entirely outside the strict military bureaucracy. Everything from fresh butter to penicillin flowed through invisible channels. Smugglers risked severe physical punishment to transport these illicit goods. Ordinary civilians were forced into systemic criminality simply to secure enough daily calories for their children. This clandestine logistical web proved that human economic ingenuity will always aggressively circumvent artificial state starvation. Barter requires a highly stable standard. Trading a grandfather clock directly for eggs is highly inefficient. The underground market desperately needed a universally accepted reserve currency. Gold was far too dangerous and incredibly difficult to divide. Citizens organically gravitated toward highly desired, non-perishable, and compact luxuries. Chocolate and coffee beans emerged as the perfect, untraceable currency of the desperate European urban centers. These highly caloric, culturally significant luxury items perfectly fulfilled the economic requirements of a stable fiat. Chocolate possessed intrinsic monetary value. It was heavily rationed and universally desired by starving populations. Small, wrapped bars were incredibly easy to hide from inspectors. They held their physical shape and could be mathematically subdivided. A single square became a highly standardized unit of economic account. Citizens began pricing their labor and black market goods entirely in grams of smuggled dark cocoa. By adopting a standardized consumable commodity, the underground economy successfully stabilized its own wildly fluctuating prices. Silk stockings became wearable gold. Textile mills had been entirely repurposed to manufacture military parachutes. Civilian clothing production had essentially ceased across the occupied continent. Nylons and silks represented the ultimate, unattainable psychological wartime luxury. Their absolute scarcity drove their black market valuation dangerously high. Women traded their precious family heirlooms just to experience a brief, fleeting moment of pre-war dignity. The hypervaluation of silk demonstrates how profound psychological deprivation artificially inflates the worth of mundane textiles. Social hierarchies completely inverted overnight. Before the war, aristocrats held all the generational financial power. Now, rural farmers controlled the most vital currency of all. Desperate urban elites traveled to the countryside with ancestral paintings. They traded centuries of accumulated artistic wealth for simple vegetables. The grinding reality of physiological starvation completely erased the traditional, rigid boundaries of European class structures. While this massive wealth transfer shifted capital away from cultural elites directly into the hands of agrarian producers. The physical risks were absolutely terrifying. Occupying police heavily patrolled the trains arriving from the countryside. Suitcases were violently searched for any hidden, untaxed agricultural contraband. Being caught with unauthorized coffee invited immediate arrest and imprisonment. Smugglers faced public execution for undermining the occupying military economy. Mothers sewed secret pockets into their heavy winter coats to quietly smuggle a few precious eggs. The extreme punitive measures reveal how deeply the occupying state feared the financial independence of its victims. Cigarettes formed the fractional reserve. While chocolate served as high-value currency, cigarettes handled small change. They were universally craved to manage the intense psychological stress. A single cigarette could secretly buy a favor or tip. Packs of tobacco acted as perfectly fungible, reliable financial deposits. Prisoners of war famously used this exact same nicotine standard to build complex, isolated microeconomies. The organic emergence of cigarette currency perfectly illustrates the core economic principles of fungibility and uniform value. The black market demanded ruthless specialists. A new class of underground brokers rapidly emerged everywhere. They possessed the logistical connections to secretly move bulk luxuries. These fixers operated in the dangerous space between occupier and civilian. They amassed incredible fortunes by violently controlling the flow of contraband. While ordinary families starved,
Alpha is compromised.
these opportunistic shadow merchants dined secretly on the finest smuggled meats. The wartime shadow economy inadvertently created a predatory class of disaster capitalists who monopolized human desperation. Even the occupiers became deeply complicit. Low-ranking enemy soldiers suffered from their own logistical supply shortages. They frequently dipped into the black market to acquire luxuries. Guards were easily bribed with a single pair of stockings. The shadow economy corrupted the supposedly disciplined mechanical military force. The soldiers tasked with enforcing rationing laws became the most reliable clients of the desperate smugglers. This hypocritical economic synergy proved that the universal desire for luxury easily supersedes rigid military ideological discipline. Children became the ultimate innocent couriers. So, they were far less likely to be searched by patrols. Kids memorized complex exchange rates for coffee, butter, and nylon. They navigated the ruined city streets carrying highly illegal cargo. Their childhoods were entirely consumed by the ruthless arithmetic of survival. An entire generation learned to calculate their worth based entirely on the fluctuating price of hidden contraband. Weaponizing children as economic assets highlights the profound moral degradation necessary to maintain logistical supply in wartime. This was the absolute architecture of misery. The shadow economy did not generate any actual new wealth. It merely redistributed the rapidly shrinking pile of available resources.
Take this coat.
Give it to me,
It was a brutal, zero-sum game played out in ruins. For every family that secured chocolate, another family went hungry. The vibrant trading of stockings was merely a beautiful facade covering the slow, agonizing starvation of a continent. When a society abandons its fiat currency for luxury barter, it signals the absolute collapse of state infrastructure. Liberation finally broke the freezing horizon. Massive armored columns rolled triumphantly into the ruined city streets. Cheering crowds greeted the exhausted soldiers with absolute, tearful joy. The occupying military apparatus rapidly retreated from the conquered territories. But the arriving armies carried a massive, unexpected economic payload. Millions of fresh chocolate bars and silk stockings suddenly flooded the desperate, starving capitals. The sudden influx of Allied logistical abundance instantly shattered the delicate equilibrium of the shadow economy. Hyperinflation destroyed the sweet standard overnight. Allied soldiers casually handed out their heavily subsidized military rations.
Chocolate! Give us the chocolate,
Jeeps were literally overflowing with thousands of pristine nylon stockings. Carton upon carton of American cigarettes was tossed to joyful civilians. The artificial scarcity that sustained the black market completely evaporated. Items that previously commanded the price of ancestral jewelry became entirely worthless in mere hours. When a tightly controlled microeconomy experiences a massive supply shock, the established fiat currency fundamentally collapses. The shadow brokers lost everything instantly. Hoarders who possessed cellars full of smuggled coffee were suddenly bankrupted. Their painstakingly accumulated dark wealth lost all purchasing power immediately. The predatory disaster capitalists watched their illicit fortunes completely vaporize. Ordinary citizens rejoiced as the oppressive, brutal pricing structures finally collapsed. The liberation of Europe became the most aggressive, rapid economic correction in modern financial history. This catastrophic deflationary event proved that the black market valuation relied entirely upon state-mandated civilian misery. A new fiat slowly took control. Official governments eventually returned to establish new, heavily backed regional currencies. The chocolate standard melted away into the forgotten annals of history. Silk stockings returned to being a simple, affordable, mundane domestic luxury. But the profound psychological shock of the brutal underground economy lingered. Millions of citizens learned the terrifying reality that money only possesses value when modern states function. The sudden destruction of the wartime barter network fundamentally rewired the socioeconomic psychology of an entire continent.
Goods from ship to
The chocolate economy evaporated without warning. Agricultural supply chains were systematically restored by the conquering Allied forces. International cargo ships brought vast quantities of desperately needed global wheat. The terrible, gnawing hunger that drove the illicit street bartering ceased. Black market fixers vanished quietly into the shadows of the industrial reconstruction. The society built entirely on trading smuggled luxury goods rapidly dissolved into mundane, quiet peacetime. See, the absolute death of the shadow economy officially signaled the true end of the Continental War. The rubble was eventually cleared away. Modern European capitals are rebuilt with gleaming glass and steel. Supermarkets overflow with an endless supply of cheap, imported chocolate. Silk and nylon stockings are now mundane, affordable, everyday items. Yet the psychological scars of that extreme material deprivation haunted survivors for decades. The invisible trauma of the shadow economy permanently altered the generational relationship with food and security. Survival rewrites the fundamental moral code. Respectable citizens were forced to become hardened, calculating black marketeers. The strict ethical boundaries of peacetime completely dissolved under starvation. The grandparents hoarded sugar and coffee beans long after liberation arrived. They remembered exactly how quickly a civilized society can plunge into desperate bartering. When the state fails to provide, the human instinct to survive aggressively bypasses all legal frameworks. Money is merely a shared illusion. We trust the digital numbers glowing quietly in our bank accounts. We believe that government fiat will always purchase our daily bread. But the sweet standard of occupied Europe proves this is fragile. If the supply chains violently snap, your paper wealth becomes instantly, absolutely worthless. True economic power resides exclusively in the physical possession of essential calories and highly desired commodities. The shadow economy teaches a terrifying lesson. Civilization is only ever 3 missed meals away from total collapse. Chocolate and silk simply revealed the ultimate fragility of modern fiat. The price of power is always paid by the desperate civilians. We must never forget the generation that bought their literal survival with dark cocoa. In the brutal arithmetic of total war, humanity will always invent a way to trade for tomorrow. The ledgers of survival are closed. The wartime generation took their bitter, desperate secrets to the grave. But their history stands as a profound warning to modern economists. Complex financial systems are incredibly vulnerable to sudden, brute physical realities. When the shelves go bare, society quickly reverts to the primal economics of absolute necessity. The ultimate historical truth is that no government fiat can ever overrule the fundamental human appetite